All right. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Happy Sunday. I hope your weekend has been going well. Mine's been great. I guess apparently there's a snow apocalypse about to come or something. I don't know how much snow we'll get. We're expecting snow in our area, probably one or two this morning, and then it'll go into Monday, which I'm happy to see snow, but I'd also like to work. So anyway, before I get into the chat, let me go ahead and put the camera on. I'm level with you, hopefully, so hopefully it looks good. All right. Yes, that looks a little better, and you can see my face just a little bit more. The lighting is just still not the way I want it, but whatever. You can see my face, and that is what is most important. So, hopefully you guys are doing well. Let's go ahead and get right into the comments, and then we're going to talk about. We're not just going to be talking about Isaac Asimov. We're actually going to be talking about just writing in general, and kind of like a forewarning to you prospective writers out there on what readers do expect. Of course, whether it's with a movie or a novel or a comic book, readers do have expectations, viewers do have expectations, and I would say um, we need to keep those expectations intact as artists. So that's the discussion, and we're going to be using Asimov's last two books of his Foundation series as a cautionary tale. So it won't be just strictly Foundation, it won't be strictly Asimov, but just kind of what to think about as writers. So I'm not giving writers advice or a writer's advice. I'm not giving writing advice as a writer. I'm giving it to you as a reader. Because readers, their opinions are important too. So we'll talk about that. But before we do, let's go ahead and get into the chat. And audio is coming through nice and clear. Thank you, my wonderful prof. And it's kind of a lazy day. This is my old work sweatshirt, like from years ago. Wow. I don't even know if the company's still around. But yeah, it's a very lazy day. It was really cold. It was really gusty. We tried to walk on average 3 miles a day around the property, and it was so gusty. I think I just did about 2 miles. So anyway, Daniel Heron, channel member and good friend. I am in the Costco before the apocalyptic blizzard of 2024. So I don't really know what that means. Now, is it in your area, or are you traveling? Are you close to us? Is that what's going on? You're also saying that people buying a lot of toilet paper and pineapples. What am I missing? I don't know. Well, if you want to know about pineapples, at least historically speaking, pineapples in colonial days was a sign of hospitality and a gesture of kindness to a fellow neighbor or traveler. It probably has some implications now, culturally speaking, but at least if you see a lot of pineapples, like in the area we're in, like I would say the proximity of like 200, 300 miles, just kind of expect if you go to a unique shop, that, is of the area, you'll find a lot of pineapple motifs here and there. So I don't know though. I don't think pineapples are particularly popular to eat though. So I can't give you an honest answer. But hopefully you learned something. Brian Gilmartin says, welcome. You say, I guess even a renowned author can make a big writing mistake from time to time. Yeah, I think this is true. And I will say, even before I forget, I'm going into this stream. I always like to give like some context before even saying anything or ranting about something. I'm going into this stream loving Asimov. He is one of my favorite sci-fi writers to date, especially in terms of classic fiction. And I will always recommend his Foundation trilogy. In fact, this is how I love it so much. Yes, look at that. That's a great cover. Beautiful book. Look at that. Beautiful. So nice. I love this. This was a gift, Christmas gift from, I think, last year. I think it was last year that I got this gift. And so far, I love the trilogy. I love the trilogy. This was published, I think, in the 1950s. The books that I'm going to be talking about, they were published in the 80s. They were published 30 years after the trilogy. And it was meant to be, I think, a sequel. According to Lynn Green, it was meant to be a sequel. I think he just passed away before he could finish that third installment of his sequel trilogy, and it's just it's an interesting story. I'm not saying it's badly written, although there are some problems we'll talk about too. But it breaks the universe. He he I love him, I respect him, and he's still my favorite sci-fi writer, especially concerning his short fiction. I love his short fiction. But he broke his universe with the last two books. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. All right. Ghost Planet Inc. Max Inc. 1.0. Welcome. Good to have you. All right. And my wonderful prof says, I'm looking forward to your thoughts on this, love. Thank you. Thank you, my prof. Big Al is in. Have a great stream, Santa Graver. Hello to everyone. Hello to you, my friend. Hopefully you are doing well. Megatron is in as well with his cool new avatar. Good evening to you, too. And I have been kind of sneezy today, so if I get off camera, it's because I'm about to sneeze. And sneezing, especially like if the camera glitches or whatever, that's just awkward. So if I'm about to sneeze, I'm gonna probably turn off the camera. I don't think I'm sick. It's just it's dust or allergies or something. It's something. All right, D Pensac, welcome to you. Thank you for coming. Final Fantasy, good to see you. Andreas Hernandez, welcome with your greeting as well. And Amy L, welcome. Thank you for coming. More SuperCollider videos on the way. I'll have one tomorrow. And Mondays, I think it will be the days that I post those. Everyone's all greeting each other. Great. Looks like a lot of people might have had the flu or something. Yeah, that's not too nice. Yeah, whatever snow that we have in our area can nothing compared to Canada and the upper Midwest and stuff like that. But I know people in Arkansas and they were saying they're getting some stuff. So yes. Amy L says, you wonder if authors deliberately break their universe so that they can perpetuate their copyright. Now, that may be. I'm not saying that that's particular to Asimov. And to be honest, anything I say is pure speculation. Well, I don't even want to speculate what had happened. Just my general sense of the last two books of his series. So if you're interested, Isaac Asimov with his Foundation series, it involves the wonderful, very enigmatic trilogy. I think it's great. I know some people it's not their cup of tea. I get it, but I love it, and I'll read it every few years or maybe every 5 or so years. I don't need to read it every year. It's not like a some people read Lord of the Rings all the time, once a year, every year. That's not the case with me, but I definitely want to keep this as part of my classics, and it's just a beautiful book. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, so the Foundation trilogy, so that's a trilogy. Then 2 books that take place 500 years after the events of the trilogy, or between 500 and 250 years, because actually the trilogy does span over the course, I think, of 2 centuries, maybe even more. So you've got the trilogy 3 books, and then you've got the 2 books after that, and then you've got 2 prequel books. I have not read the prequel books, and I'm going to take a break from the series. And that's because the prequel books were published a few years after the sequel books. And the prequel books involve Harry Seldon as the main protagonist. And just because I was fairly disappointed with the protagonist of the sequels, I'm like, if he's even close to what I had seen with other protagonists, I'm like, I kind of want Harry Seldon to remain a mystery. Some people do recommend it, though. Some people say that the 2 prequel books of the trilogy or the series rather, is their favorite. And then some people, I even got a comment from one of my listeners. I can't remember the name, but it's in one of the stream comments, recent streams. He recommended reading the robot series first. So I love the world building Asimov made with the robots and the computers. His short fiction is so good. Well, I appreciate it very much. It's one of my favorite pieces of short fiction, those involving the robots, and also Multivac, like the seemingly all-powerful computer. I love those. He's great with short fiction. And this person recommended me read the robot novels. And so since I love the short fiction with his robot series, or robot world, the world of robots, I love The Bicentennial Man. I think that's probably among his best works. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll read those first and then the prequel books. But after knowing that the prequels were published a few years after the sequels, I was like, oh no, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous. I don't want the figure of Harry Seldon kind of tarnished. So, Final Fantasy fan breaks the universe. What else breaks the universe besides a paradox? I mean, yeah, and I know that's a topic that's explored a lot, with science fiction. All right, Dig Outlaw is in. If you like science fiction, check him out. Check him out. He's a contemporary sci-fi writer, and go by that name, Adega Outlaw. That's his writer name too. I think that's how you find him on platforms like Amazon. Andreas Hernandez, I have never seen the Bicentennial Man movie with Robin Williams. I've read about it. I do understand that it is fairly different from the novella. I call it a novella. Maybe it's a novelette. It's a pretty long story, even though it's not novel length. Um, I haven't seen the movie, and I think I can see it and appreciate it for what it is, even if it might be a little different from Asimov's works. So sorry, I don't have any thoughts on the Robin Williams movie. Um, the Bicentennial Man, the book, could really be adapted. Really, it could really be well done as a play, as a really highly produced play. I would love to see it as a play. That it would be great. It'd be great. It'd probably need a narration, but yeah, it's a good book. So anyway, that is it with the chat. Let's go ahead and talk about that real quick. I think I am gonna sneeze. 1 second. All right. So I did mute myself, and now I'm talking now. So let's talk about Isaac Asimov and how, as respected as he is, as much as I love him, as much as I like his writings, how he maybe even unwittingly broke his universe. So I got to give you some context. So going forward with this stream, I'm not going to give you any spoilers for the trilogy. I still recommend it. I'm just going to give you the context of the trilogy. And then I'm going to more or less, if it happens, likely I will spoil Foundation's Edge, which was the book after 500 years, taking place after the main events of the trilogy. Foundation's Edge and Foundation and Earth. So those are the two titles, and you can see it on the thumbnail just in case you're confused. So to give you some context, the Foundation trilogy, or the Foundation series, is very much on the scope, just as far as world building, is a galactic empire full of humans. So the human race, a galactic empire. Asimov, it's noted that he's among the first, if not the first, to establish that concept of a galactic empire. He was really very much inspired by the events regarding the Roman Empire and subsequently the collapse of the Roman Empire. And basically, just in a nutshell, the Foundation trilogy, the trilogy that he published in the 1950s, is basically taking the, I guess, premonition or the impending doom, the impending collapse of the Roman Empire, and he's just scaling it out into the cosmos. He's creating a galaxy full of millions and millions of inhabited worlds, and it's got some age. I think it spans as far as the galactic empire into the events of the trilogy. I think it's like 20,000 years after the first people of Earth leave, um, kind of an Earth that is pretty much set to be doomed. And I think I can't remember how he played that out, but anyway, it's no longer going to be a planet that's inhabited. So anyway, people leave Earth, and then 20,000 years later, you have the events of the Foundation trilogy. And you have this key figure who is a scientist, a mathematician who works in statistics and history. And he develops this science called psychohistory. So this is Harry Seldon. And he develops this science of psychohistory using history, statistics, mathematics to accurately predict not just the downfall of the galactic empire, but certain crises, certain pivotal events that will ensue 30,000 years of complete anarchy of civilizations, like total oblivion. So there's no civilizations for 30,000 years, or something that can direct people, direct politicians, direct merchants and leaders and stuff like that to direct closing that 30,000 year interim of chaos and anarchy to close it in for 1,000 years. So there's going to be doom regardless. Harry Seldon warns the people of the empire and the emperor himself and all of that. He warns, saying, "Hey, there's no escaping the collapse of the empire. There are going to be warlords. There's going to be anarchy. There's going to be people. There's going to be infighting. The empire is going to close itself in. It's going to go inward, inward, inward. So worlds on the periphery, they're going to be in trouble, and people are going to be fighting the weaker worlds, and there's going to be domination and chaos and everything." And so he warns the galaxy, saying, "There's no going around this. But the way to circumvent the 30,000 years of anarchy is to put it into 1,000 years with." Listen, I'm going to record myself. He doesn't tell them this outright, but through the foundation that he's established of scientists and bright people, he records himself and his prediction, saying, "Hey, I have a prediction that this is going to happen." The first prediction that's in his vault is 50 years after the fact, after he's been pretty much tried and arrested at like the age of, I don't know, he's probably in his 90s. He's like 2 years from dying. Like he's an old man when he's tried and put into custody, and then they exile him. They go to this planet world, this peripheral world called Terminus. He sets up a foundation of, I think, 1,000 scientists and their families, if I can remember that. And basically what the foundation is, that's called the Foundation trilogy. Foundation is just a group of people who are initially archiving and maintaining all knowledge of civilization, technology, and all that jazz. There's a little bit of a twist going into the books, which I won't get into. But basically, the Foundation is a group of people on Terminus that they're not really. They think they're protected by the Empire that's about to collapse, but decades later, some politicians start to understand, oh, we got to fend for ourselves, and there's going to be a crisis at hand. So and all that. So that wasn't really in a nutshell, but it basically ensues a lot of worlds, infighting between worlds, really ambitious generals that are trying to dominate things, subsequent emperors that are trying to control things, and basically politicians kind of either confiding within amongst themselves about Harry Seldon and his grand plan. Are things going according to his plan? Is everything working and according to his plan? Because if everything is working according to his plan, then chaos is only going to be 1,000 years. And then there are a lot of different things that are that set up the world to be quite intriguing. Now, into the middle of the trilogy, so getting into the end of the first book into the second book, we've established that the Foundation, Harry Seldon's Foundation, is it becomes pretty technologically advanced. It becomes militaristic. It becomes, I think their technology was secret forever because warlords were going against them, and some certain politicians had to go against the warlords and be cunning and bring those warlords into submission or defeat or whatever. But basically, there's this kind of, I would say, there's on Terminus, there's this growing technology, and over the span of 200 years, this is kind of getting where the second book is taking place. Over the span of 200 years, they become so technologically advanced that they become their own kind of militaristic federation of sorts. And they most of the foundation with a politician or someone else, most of them see themselves as the hope for the second empire. I meant to say that um, beforehand. Harry Seldon thinks at the end of 1,000 years, at the end of the interim, a second and better empire will be established. And so the first foundation and the world, other worlds around it kind of agree, saying, well, they're the most powerful, they're the most organized, they're the most authoritative, they're going, obviously they're going to be the second empire. And then we see a foil of sorts. And I won't go into the details because again, this is like the best part. I really think this is one of the best parts of the Foundation trilogy. There's a figure who is working against the Selden plan that Selden himself did not predict. And this figure, the mule, I'm not going to say who he is. I don't even want to describe him because I don't want to spoil it. It's good. Go check it out. Go read those books. But the mule is thwarting the Selden plan. And basically, he has the power and not just militaristic power, but he has cunning and even more than that. He has mentalics, described as mentalics. He is converting people to his will with a power that had not been seen before, with a power that had not been known before. This is not in accordance with the Selden plan. And he rises to power, and with a twist and kind of a tragedy on its own, he is subdued. That's not really a spoiler. How he rises to power and how he is subdued, that's where things get really, really interesting. And because of the rise of his mentalics and power, people are, besides themselves, they're thinking, okay, Selden didn't predict this. What's going on? And then there starts to emerge this knowledge that there had been a second foundation at work since the first foundation. And now the first foundation wants to find the second foundation. Who are these people? And so basically the first foundation is this militaristic, highly advanced, highly technological federation of people at work around the empire. And then they see the threat of this second foundation. Now, the second foundation we see a little bit later is a group of people who are not technologically advanced, but they are, compared to the power and technology of the first foundation, the second foundation can control people's minds. So, who's more powerful? Really, the question of getting into the second and third books of the trilogy, the question is, well, who's more powerful? The general with his warship, or the person without the warship who can control the mind of the general with the warship? And so Asimov really built this really intriguing conflict between the first foundation and the second foundation. And the history of the second foundation is a little obscured, and I don't really understand the relationship. I need to actually kind of do some digging. Did Asimov set up this foundation of people who can control minds, the highly mentalic people, with the gifts of mentalics? That's the term that Asimov uses. And so by the end of the trilogy, you see the second foundation as this benevolent force that can also dominate the minds of people. And the third book, the last book of the trilogy, it doesn't end in a cliffhanger. It could function as a cliffhanger. It's fine on its own if the ending is enigmatic. It's a mystery. And it's actually the last sentence it just kind of like strikes you. It's like, whoa, that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. And it can go on. It can go on to subsequent installments, and I wish it did. It does a little bit in the fourth book, Foundation's Edge. And it's just a very interesting setup. You've got this galaxy of millions of worlds of people, of human beings. the empire has collapsed. By I think the middle of the first book, the empire is pretty much going inward, collapsing, collapsing, collapsing. Outer worlds are abandoned, and there chaos will ensue. It's just really the series is just events and crises and certain figures reacting to the crises and seeing if they're maintaining that flow, if they're maintaining the Selden plan for preservation, for civilization, the preservation of civilization. And then you've got this other force. First you have the mule, and then you have this other force called the second foundation that really would be the antithesis of the first foundation. And who's going to win, or how can they win, or are they going to rule together in harmony? Like it's very mysterious. It's very intriguing. I feel like I'm not doing it justice with my own words. But Asimov set up a really good world, rebuilding an empire or a new empire. But who is the real force at work? And what's going to be the resolve of that? What's going to be the resolution of that? So it's pretty engaging. I highly recommend the trilogy just on its own. So just so I can use my prop again, because the book is so beautiful. Just these books, and if you see on the back, you can see Foundation, Empire, Foundation. Okay, so it's Foundation, Empire. I did it again. Foundation, and Empire, and Second Foundation. So the trilogy really ends on this question, like, okay, who are these people in the Second Foundation? Are they good? Are they bad? They have power over people with weapons. They have power over military. They have power over the Federation. Who are they? Are they on our side? Are they on the side of the galaxy, or do they want to control the galaxy? By their own gain, and it's interesting. Okay, so that's the context of the trilogy. The two books after that, we'll start with Foundation's Edge. So Foundation's Edge, I like it to an extent. I really want to like this book and give it an A+, and it was almost there for me. It would have been, I consider Foundation's Edge a very good start of a sequel, because we get into the minds pretty much exclusively for a little bit. We get into them, no, that's not true, but equally, we get into the minds of the Second Foundation, the leaders of the Second Foundation, where they are, the different schemings going on between the really high and mighty Second Foundation, the manipulation, their ability to use mentalics and coerce someone's mind or caress someone's mind, kind of in a way creepy stuff, but that's what makes science fiction kind of fascinating. And so we're toggling back and forth between the minds of the Second Foundation, who are trying to remain hidden. They're trying to make their look, well, I think for many centuries, even decades and decades and decades, they've made their location unknown. And the First Foundation, not many people believe in the Second Foundation. They kind of think it's a myth, or they think it's a superstition, those who live on Terminus. But there are some people, some leaders, or a council person, actually a councilman, who believes, hey, these guys do exist. We need to find them. And so the fourth book really goes with, back and forth between, okay, Second Foundation has to stay hidden. They don't want their schemings known. And then you've got your First Foundation. So the First Foundation, the protagonist, his name, the representative, I should say, of the First Foundation, his name is Golan Trevize. And he represents he represents the First Foundation in a way, but also the mayor of the First Foundation pretty much sends him on exile, because he said blasphemous things about the Selden plan. Like, the Selden plan, it's moot. It doesn't matter. Or maybe I think he went so far as to say it doesn't exist, or basically says it's a non-essential. It doesn't matter. We've been building our federation for 500 years now, almost 500 years, on this plan. The mule thwarted it. Who's to say the next 500 years something else won't happen? And he's trying to investigate the Second Foundation. The mayor wants him to pursue more knowledge of the second foundation. And then Treves is accompanied by this scholar, this historian by the name of Pellerit, Pellerit, who's a very likable uh, intellectual man, and he's kind of soft spoken, and he's never traveled in space before. He's kind of nervous about flying and stuff like that. He's a very likable character, and so we're following their perspective as far as the first foundation is concerned, and then the second foundation actually involves two characters, but really the main protagonist, Stor Gendable, and he's actually very likable. He's very gruff with authority. He's kind of cocky. He's kind of arrogant, but he also has a soft side as well. He kind of at first he thinks he's above these village farmer people that live in the surrounding areas of their kind of hubble. They're kind of not hubble, but their hideout. It's not a hideaway. It's like a hideout. I don't want to describe it. It's cool. It's so cool. There can be so much great concept art where they are. But you just have to read the stories. But anyway, he kind of sees himself a little bit above these farmers who made themselves at home around this planet. Until he's actually in big trouble, and he kind of gets into a skirmish, almost a skirmish with a big farmer who has a very base vocabulary, very base language. Something you would expect of someone who just has no intellect at all. And then a woman interferes, and she has the same base language and the base intellect, and he kind of looks down on her because of the tears of intellect and stuff like that. But then he starts growing very fondly of her. She's not described as anyone attractive either. She kind of has a long, nose and unkempt hair, and she wears brown, and she's barefoot and stuff like that. And so she's not altogether ugly, but she's just not attractive like he's used to seeing. But he's just developed just a natural fondness the more he gets to know her and stuff like that. And then, without saying so much, they are very attracted to each other. And I like him. I like him a lot. And so for most of this book, for most of Foundation's Edge, it is kind of this like clandestine, like first foundation's trying to get to the second foundation's trying to discover a force at work, another force at work that could be more powerful than the second foundation. I'm like, okay, I kind of like the second foundation being uber powerful. I don't think there needs to be another mystery. I don't think there needs to be another force at work. But okay, whatever. Second foundation is thinking, okay, maybe there's another mule, or even someone who's more powerful than the mule. Where is this metallic signature coming from? So he's investigating, and he's for different reasons he takes Novi with him, who is the village woman. And so yeah, you've got some interesting intellectual things going on in action, investigation and stuff like that. Not direct action, but enough manipulation and scheming and stuff like that. It's great. It's great. And I thought it was great until the very end of the book. So both Golan Treves of the first foundation and Stor Gendable of the second foundation, they kind of meet at this nexus, at the height, the climactic discovery of what is going on. Who is threatening the Selden plan? Who is threatening even the second foundation? Because the second foundation, they're scheming, but they're kind of benevolent too. They want to work according to the Selden plan. Most of them anyway. And so they arrive at this nexus at the end of the book. And it's this. So this is kind of getting into spoilers, because this is where I get a little unhappy with the trajectory of the story. It's this being that is this conglomeration of all living things, and it's set at this planet called Gaia. And Gaia, if you think about it, is Earth. It's Terranean or whatever, but it's not Earth. I don't know why they called it Gaia, now that I think about it, because I thought, oh, that's Earth, Ooh, that's cool. Because the scholar Parallax, he wants to find out where Earth is. They think it's Earth, but it's this other planet called Gaia. And Gaia is basically a conglomeration of all living beings, like from the moss on the ground to the human population dwelling in Gaia. It's this um, very spiritual world that really wants to work to the benefit of all living things. But they live in a very different way, whereas human beings are they human beings need community, but we're not a collectivist, being. So we need community. We need to be communing with one another, whether vocationally or spiritually, involving religion or something like that, or family, familial ties, and all that. So we understand that as human beings, we're not completely isolated. But Gaia is you're going to be fulfilled as a collectivist entity. It's purely beneficial. It's purely benevolent. It's actually like the pretty much the person who believes utopia and coexisting and stuff like that. This was published in the 80s, so I can start understanding like the sentiment, like the cultural sentiment behind the story. But they encounter Gaia. So first foundation and second foundation encounter each other and they encounter Gaia. Now, first of all, when you set up this conflict between first foundation and second foundation, the first foundation with the weapons and the technology, and the second foundation with absolute mental power over you, well, don't you want a resolution between them? Turns out you don't get that resolution. Turns out Gaia wants everyone at peace. And so the mayor of the first foundation, she goes home and she thinks she's solved it all, and her name is going to be great among all the history and stuff like that. She's a woman of great hubris, and she's I think Asimov a little bit. I think he makes fun of the feminists of his time because she's kind of like the 60s, the unmarried woman in her 60s with the butch cut gray hair and the kind of like grovelly voice and broad shoulders and stuff like that. So I think he kind of made fun of feminism a little bit like that, as much as he could, because he had editors in the science fiction world and they were probably all women, most of them. That's not fair, but I'm guessing a lot of his editors were women. Anyway, she goes back to her home planet Terminus thinking they solved it. They solved the problem. Storgendable of the Second Foundation is he assumes the role as first speaker, the head of the Second Foundationers, and he's with Novi. He wants Novi to be with him, and basically they forget all the conflict involved about that extra force that is Gaia, except Golan Treves. He goes to Gaia, the planet, with his scholar friend. The scholar friend falls in love with a Gaian woman, and he basically Golan Treves is pretty much like the impetus to move the galaxy forward. This is where I got a little upset. But basically, Gaia brought Treves and Gendable to meet each other. And then Treves, they wanted Treves because apparently Treves is the human, he's the protagonist, but he's the human being that Gaia knows, he knows what's right. And Treves he has great intuition that he's never understood. He's like, I get this. I can converse with a high-tech computer, like a really advanced computer. I know how this computer of this spaceship works. Only I can pilot the spaceship. Like, he has this really strange intuition that no one else has, that's unique to him. And like, okay, well, that will probably be explained in the fifth book, Foundation and Earth, and it is explained, unfortunately. But Gaia wanted Treves to make a decision, and that is, how should the galaxy move on forward? Should it just be the first foundation? Should it just be the second foundation? Or should it be Gaia, or Gaia expanded to a galaxy is Galaxia? So Gaia is the collectivist, sentient, it's not a planet. It's just all the living things on the planet having the same perspective and stuff like that. So Gaia would expand to Galaxia. So millions and millions and millions of worlds trillions upon quadrillions, like immeasurable amount of people would share this kind of collectivist, sentient way of life known as Galaxia. Treves doesn't choose First Foundation. He doesn't choose Second Foundation. He chooses Galaxia. And I'm like, all right. Well, whatever. It's a story. It's not a badly written story. I think of the two Foundations Edge is written okay. I would give it a B, like B or B minus. It's not a bad story. But the ending was like this 2 to 3 centuries long conflict between First Foundation and Second Foundation. And then they just like go to their home worlds thinking everything is hunky dory, not having really remembered. They remember their encounter with Gaia, but they don't understand Gaia's influence on their minds. So the uber powerful Second Foundation is like they're done. They went home like a chump. Thor Gendable, who I really like as a character, he went out like a chump. So that's Foundation's Edge. You've got, just as a recap, you've got a very hyper militaristic, hyper technology First Foundation, and a very, very powerful in the way of mentalic Second Foundation, and then they go home. They don't outgun each other. Like one doesn't outgun the other. One doesn't outmaneuver another. It's just like, oh, Gaia, this planet, just they want Galaxia. They don't want the two foundations. They just want Galaxia. And so I thought, okay, that's kind of a defeating ending. I was like, man, I wanted it resolved between the first and second foundation. I didn't care about this force, this Gaian force. It just seemed a little weird. So that's Foundation's Edge. I spilled water on my keyboard. Dang it. So Foundation's Edge happens 500 years, well, really 250 years or so, 200 to 300 years after the last events take place with the Foundation trilogy. Foundation and Earth. This may come to be a rant. One second. I think I need to check something. Okay. I just had to check something. Foundation and Earth. This is the last book of the series. So Foundation and Earth, I'll get to the major problems. So we're getting to the major problems. This is important for writers because readers will have expectations. If you build an interesting world, interesting enough to keep them going, do not change those expectations. Roll with those expectations. Foundation and Earth pretty much, we'll start with the major problems and then we'll go to the minor problems. The major problem in Foundation and Earth, the final book of the Foundation series, is Asimov pretty much takes a dump. Yeah, I want to say that phrase right. Takes a dump on his whole world, his whole universe. So how am I going to say this? I'll just actually talk about the book first, and then we'll put some context around it. So Foundation and Earth, after their encounter with Gaia, after you don't even hear about the second foundation anymore. Like it's kind of mentioned once or twice. But Foundation and Earth is following pretty much 3 characters the whole way through, and pretty much the perspective. This is the first time in all the series we're following the perspective of Golan Treves. We're in his perspective pretty much the whole time. There's maybe 1 or 2 passages where we're in another person's perspective. But Golan Treves decided Galaxia for the galaxy, for Foundation's universe. That Gaia will take control and establish the galaxy moving forward with their collectivism. And Treves is fine. Well, no, I'll say this. Treves accepts that he said Galaxia because he knows it's right. The problem is he's wrestling within himself. He doesn't know why it's right. And that's where he wants to find out. And so he's like, you know what? I said this for our galaxy. I don't know why, because I'm not really in agreement with Galaxia, but I feel that it's right. And Gaia, you think I'm right, you think I'm hyper intuitive, though you don't know why, but you don't want to mess with my mind. I'm uber intuitive. I know I made the right choice, but I want to know why I made the right choice. That's pretty much the whole setup for Foundation and Earth. And so he decides that the way to find it is to find Earth. He's like, I don't know why, but Earth has the answer. I need to find Earth. Now, pretty much the problem going forward is everyone around him, like no matter how far out he goes into the galaxy, to wherever Earth may be, um, everywhere he goes, people say you're not going to find Earth. Earth is non-existent, and basically the reason why is there are two things. Earth, as Pellerit, the scholar, says, Earth is the original home of the human race, of all the beings, all the spacers and explorers and everyone involved going out to different worlds. Everyone, well, at least Trevise knows and Pellerit knows that Earth is the original home of the human race. So that's the first thing. The second thing, however, the whole point of the conflict is that there is no record of Earth anywhere. It's either just so old that there's no record, or something's been tampered with. How can something, the origin of the human race, how can something as significant as that be pretty much non-existent wherever you go? So Trevise has a problem with that. Initially, in Foundation and Earth, Pellerit had a problem with that as a scholar. He's like, I want to see Earth. And then he falls in love with this Gaian woman and he doesn't care. He'd rather stay in Gaian, but he likes Trevise. So he accompanies Trevise with Bliss, the Gaian woman. So Bliss is her name. And they start their adventure going to Earth. And there's very little mention of the Selden plan going forward. But when it is mentioned, Trevise has a problem with it. He's like, I don't understand. I've never really understood the Selden plan. I know very little about it, but the little I do know, I don't think it's right. And so Asimov set him up as this hyper intuitive protagonist. And then that's pretty much it as far as the Selden plan in context until the very end, which we will get to. So they're going through all these worlds, and they turn up empty every time. And not only that, worlds are very antagonistic toward them. Culturally speaking, they run into things like wild dogs, and Asimov really developed a very interesting idea of the unterraforming. So when humans leave, the Earth goes back into its own cycle, but without the cultivation and the science that human beings have helped Earth with. There's kind of this unterraforming process, which causes wildlife to be extra dangerous. Like there's kind of an imbalance going on. So that I thought was kind of interesting. It's a world where it was inhabited by humans, but now that it's not, it's kind of undergoing its own regression of sorts, especially with the wild animals. So they run into like wild dogs that want to like chew their bones and stuff like that, and um, they run into hermaphrodite who's very egocentric but very much an isolated being, but he has the power to just kill them instantaneously. Pretty interesting. There were some interesting moments in the book. But they always, no matter where they go, no matter what threat they face, they always turn up empty with no new information about Earth. And they go off of like three mythological premises to find Earth. And one I found that was really strange. I don't know why Asimov decided this, but one is that Earth has a satellite, the moon. That's what, a quarter of its size? I forget my basic astronomy there, but like, oh, apparently no other world has satellites like the moon in his world. I was like, what? That's so strange. I might have misremembered it, but I think it's like, oh, that's a moon. That's a moon. I know that's a weird word to say. The scholars like that they use the word moon for that. I'm like, out of all the millions of planets out there, there are no moons? What? I don't know the reason Asimov decided that, but But that was one thing, and there were a couple other mythological premises too. I think Saturn was one of them. This kind of weird, beautiful, you know, set of rings around Saturn. I think that was one, and I think Jupiter was another mythological reference of like it being a massive gas giant or something like that. So ultimately, they find the location of Earth, and they want information about Earth. They want to explore Earth and all that. But everyone who does every the little information that people would know about Earth, the closer they get to Earth, is like, "Hey, it's radioactive. You can't touch it." And so Travis is like, "No, no, it's not radioactive. It feels so right. I need to explore this." And then he sees at the end of his journey, at the end of their very long journey, he sees that the world is radioactive, and it's I think I think it's only intensifying. I can't remember exactly. So they're about to give up. He's like, I can't give up. I'll send you guys back to Gaia. I can't give up. And then it dawns on him that while the Earth is radioactive, the moon is not. And they go to the moon, and in the surface, under the surface of the moon, and he's played with this with his other short fiction, where there are just mansions and the under the interior or under the surface of the moon, it can remain inhabitable. And they find that it is inhabitable by robots. Now they've encountered robots before. I should mention that they do encounter robots before. But they encounter in this moon. So major spoiler if you want to, read this book, Foundation and Earth. They encounter one sole robot, and apparently he is introduced in the prequel. So I'm kind of nervous about that. But basically, they see this robot, and it's basically a robot that has omnipotent, omnipotent. Never say that word on stream. Omnipotent power and control over all of humanity in congruence with Gaia. So Gaia is the human and animal and plant life that is the collectivist, but this singular robot over the span of 20,000 years has been orchestrating everything. And so Travis, his hyper intuition, has been nudged and controlled by this one robot. And it really strips the individuality of people and their decisions, and also just the agency of people. When I read that, I was like, well, I was disgusted. So we're gonna get into the whole point of my stream, guys. Thank you for listening to as much as you are. But basically, it's this one robot who's basically God. He has total mental control over the first Foundation worlds, the second Foundationers, and also he doesn't interfere with Gaia. He's working with Gaia on certain conditions, and he's had robots with him. This robot, I forgot his name. Daniel, I think is his name. Daniel, I think. And then he's had robots, going into other worlds. They're very hyper advanced, so they look human, even though they do have kind of that robot persona or whatever. And so basically, he had been working behind the Selden plan, behind the Galactic Empire, all these years, all these centuries, and totally stripping. Well, Gaia did it first, but he's like the ultimate, stripping of the power of someone like the Mule, or the power of the second Foundationers, or the agency of the politicians of the first Foundation, or those working with or against the first Foundation. He was behind it all. He was behind it all. And the crime actually I have against the very ending of this book is this robot character actually goes against the 3 laws of robotics. And I'll talk about the 3 laws of robotics at a different time. But basically, the 3 laws are those laws are the basis of all stories going forward involving robots. You've got the first law, you've got the second law, which cannot happen at the expense of the first law, and then the third law can be done, but not at the expense or not at the contradiction of the first 2 laws. But that wasn't enough for it wasn't enough for Daniel. He's like, "Well, this poses a problem for how I need to work the galaxy." And he creates a zeroth law. And basically it pretty much trumps over the three laws of robotics in a very simple way. And I wish Asimov didn't do that. And more than that, the Selden's plan, Trevize is like, I never understood the Selden plan, but what the little I knew of the Selden plan, I didn't feel right about it. It's like, don't. First of all, that's not a good premise. Like, you need to understand the theology before attacking the religion. Okay, that's basically a given for any character for any setting. But he's like, I don't like the Selden plan, even though I didn't really understand the Selden plan. And basically, he found out what caused that incongruence in his mind with the Selden plan, and that was, oh, the Selden plan only worked for the galactic empire of human beings because up until this point we thought we were the only intelligent beings. Turns out robots are also intelligent. But then Selden was really only working with organic intelligent human beings. And and so maybe on that on in that way the Selden plan would work because it's working in congruence with a galactic empire of human beings. No other race, no other alien race and stuff like that. And up until this point, no robots. But so Trevize is like, well, okay, that the Selden plan will work, except maybe it's just not going to work for our galaxy because there are so many millions of galaxies out there that we don't even know about, and so many there are intelligent races. There've got to be intelligent races out there that are not human, that maybe are just fighting amongst themselves, and then when they're the strongest fight the weakest over in those galaxies, they're going to come to us. And that's why the Selden plan doesn't work, because Selden didn't consider the galaxies beyond our galaxy. And I was like, okay, first of all, you ruined your law of robotics. That's kind of a crime. But then you just totally, well, to put it crassly, took a piss on all your foundation universe. Because the foundation, the infrastructure was the Selden plan, and who was going to be for it and who was going to be against it, and what was going to happen if either side won. That was the whole point of the galaxy, of the Foundation trilogy, involving the galactic empire of, yes, human beings. But now it doesn't matter, because now we have to consider other galaxies. That was the end. That was the very end of Foundation and Earth. And thank you for that. That was a long rant, but yeah, that was the end of the series, of saying, three laws of robotics doesn't work. Now here's again, I've only read the short fiction of the robotic stuff, and the laws are pertaining to the infrastructure of that short fiction. So maybe the robot novels have something that go against the three laws of robotics that I don't see yet. Maybe I'll have a clear definition of that going forward with the robot series. But when Asimov just basically, dumped trash all over his Selden plan and all over his world building, I knew the ending was going to be a little deflating, because I just wasn't liking Gaia. I wasn't liking an external force outside the mule. I was not liking the external force threatening the second foundation, because I wanted a fight between first and second foundation. That's what I wanted. Who's going to trump the other, and who's going to set up the second empire? That's what I wanted out of the three books. It was setting itself up for that. But then 30 years later, something must have happened between maybe editorial requests, maybe fans, maybe readers of Asimov. Something changed in Asimov. I don't know what. I'm not going to speculate what, but something changed in him over the course of 30 years that made him. It really looks like he did not like the world he set up. And I want to say, this is the whole point of the stream. If you've got something good going for you for your universe, keep it, leave it, let readers like it. And if 20 to 30 years from, down the road, you decide that you don't like it or you want to change it, don't change it. And at the very least, don't write subsequent stories following the events of the original stories that totally say, that world doesn't matter. What I published, 30 years ago, that doesn't matter. It gave me the huge and very strong impression. It gave me the strong impression that Asimov did not like or appreciate what he did with the Foundation trilogy. Like, as if there was some error, as if some readership, maybe some scientist mocking him. Maybe there was some scientist mocking him. Maybe some readership. Maybe people are saying, "Why don't you have aliens? Or why don't you connect the robots to the Foundation series?" I don't really mind the idea of connecting the robot world to the Foundation world. I think that's actually a very interesting premise, but I would just say not the way he did it. He mocked his robot universe with putting in the zeroth law of the robots, and he absolutely mocked the Selden plan. I'm not saying characters can't scrutinize and go against the Selden plan. I'm not even saying the protagonists can go against the Selden plan. But when the author actually says, "Hey, it doesn't matter anymore. There are galaxies that will change our minds and stuff like that. There are going to be alien races that will change our minds." I'm like, I really did like what you had with the trilogy. So, all that to say, thank you guys for riding that wave with me. All that to say is, even so, even though Asimov 30 years later after publishing this, I still recommend the Foundation trilogy. I just like with Star Wars, I can watch the original trilogy and not be so sad about Disney. Just even with authors themselves, even with Asimov himself, with what he did with the subsequent books, I still recommend the Foundation trilogy. I just won't recommend the next novels, like the concluding books. I haven't read the prequels. I'm a little dubious. If the prequels were published anytime closer to the Foundation trilogy, I would be a lot more eager to read, but I am proceeding with caution. And I don't read bad books on purpose, guys. Like, I thought, again, I said before, I thought Hyperion was going to be amazing because it had such success for decades. I didn't go into Hyperion thinking it was going to be a bad book. I didn't go into the last two books of the Foundation series thinking it was going to be a bad book, or a couple of bad books. Foundation's Edge is interesting. I kind of like it, except for that ending with Gaia. So all that to say is, I'm going to get into the chat. When you set up a world, when you set up your fictional universe, and it gains prestige, especially, but even if it doesn't, even if you have just a handful of readers who say, "I like what you did," don't 10, 20 years, 30 years from the time of the publication, don't say, I don't like that. Or don't have reviews get to you saying, "Well, that's not scientific enough." Like, just roll with it, saying, "Hey, that's the world I established those years ago." And don't publish books that pretty much destroy the intrigue, the mystery, and what made it so good to begin with. So that is the moral of the story, folks. Let's go ahead and go to the chat. Hopefully I said what I said in a clear way. And if we do have time, I want to actually, so that was the major thing. So we'll recap that, but then we'll talk about the minor things that you don't do as a writer. All right. Looks like you guys are talking amongst yourselves for a little bit. That's cool that you guys are conversing. That's great. Talking about art, talking about your projects. Andres Hernandez says, even though people argue the I, Robot movie with Will Smith is a bad adaptation, does anyone like the movie by itself, not knowing the fact that it is an adaptation of Asimov? Okay, I saw that movie a long time ago. And I don't think was I reading? I can't remember if I was reading Asimov at the time. I guess I would have to watch that movie again. I wasn't compelled. I don't I think the antagonists that were the robots going rogue against humanity, and then that kind of city war against robots toward the end, I didn't feel for any of the characters. I didn't feel for the situation, and I'm not sure why. It didn't compel me. I feel like the narrative could be interesting, and I think they're involved like a motherboard or a computer, like super powerful computer and stuff like that. It didn't send me. Um, I tell you what, a really good adaptation of the life and times of Multivac, Asimov's short story of the Multivac, that would be good. I feel like, oh man, I really feel like some of his short fiction could be not even just a movie adaptation, just like a well done cinematic play or something like that with real good set design and stuff like that. I mean, so I Robot with Will Smith, it wasn't my favorite. I felt like the antagonism, I felt like it was too simple. Um, his personal conflict, I can't remember the Will Smith's his character. I can't remember his name. His prejudice against robots, I thought was a good conflict. In fact, I think a better movie would have been him having to work with a robot with his prejudice against robots. Without giving so much of the spoilers of what happened, for a robot saved oh, I can't say that basically, a robot saved his life in a way that scarred him, and it's because of the robotic logic. So he he was telling well, I don't wanna spoil I don't know if this is spoiling it. Basically, I won't go into how, but he was telling the robot, "Save this other person, save this child," but the robot who saved him believed there was more of a chance of him surviving than the child, so the robot went with those numbers, and he had post-trauma or something like that. He never forgave himself, he never forgave robots or whatever. So he had this really interesting internal conflict. I didn't I don't know why. I just didn't like the robots, like, when they were going rogue and antagonistic toward human beings, like, their was it their heads or their chests? They're kinda like this, kinda pearly look, this, like, translucent look, and they're kinda bluish white when they're dormant or whatever, but then when they get angry against humans, they turn red and stuff like that. Cool idea for a design, but, like, it annoyed me somehow, so it wasn't my favorite. It really wasn't my favorite, but I when it's from what I can remember, it's not a completely bad movie. Um, I think what was that YouTuber? CinemaSins, I think is his name. Um, he did a version of that movie, and, it's kinda funny. Uh, I haven't seen CinemaSins in a long time, but, yeah. Anyway, I don't even know if CinemaSins is still around. It's been years since I've seen that channel. Amy L says that this sounds like he had no plans on what to write. It was all improvised, just like those TV series I used to watch when I was, small. I think I think it was, Fan Man. He talks about Halloween, the film, like, it's perfect on its own. Like, the Foundation trilogy is perfect on its own, and, you don't need to read anything more. Again, I say it doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It can function like a cliffhanger, but it's actually just it ends on this question mark. And Fan Man was talking about that in that context with the movie Halloween, where it's perfect as its own. It didn't need any sequels. That's how I'm feeling about Foundation Trilogy. And I wonder, I should kind of look into maybe interviews or documentaries or some sort of thing that goes into the mind of why Asimov published books 30 years after the fact. He didn't have to. He could have just continued writing on short fiction. So anything going forward with the adaptation series, if they take from Foundation's Edge and Foundation and Earth, and people say like you can't criticize that show anymore because they were true to those books. I'm like I don't like those books. So so and I'm saying this not against Asimov himself. He's still my favorite writer. It's just that was a bad way to end a book series. If you really don't have a compelling if you don't have a compelling ending to the series, or if you don't or if you go about it wrecking the lore of your previous books, don't write those books. You're gonna make readers mad. You're gonna really make readers feel deflated and saying, "Oh, no, that's not how I wanted to I didn't want it to end like that," you know? So, anyway. Andreas Fernandez says, "Do you think Asimov wanted to move on from their world, but he was forced to write more? He had a story to tell, and he told it, and he wasn't the type to milk it." I kinda wish he did, though. I kinda wish he would've milked the premise of the conflict between the first 2 the 2 foundations. Um, I don't know. But again, I don't know the situation, so, um or maybe something in him changed. Maybe he thought he was writing the right thing. I don't think it was. And then people say, "Well, you can't you have no say in that sound engraver. It's the author who has the final say of what he wants and stuff." It's like, he can write whatever he wants. It's not gonna guarantee a good closure to things. 'Cause why? We're human beings, we make mistakes. Like, that's something to think about as a writer or as an artist in particular. Like, you can set up your series or whatever, your comic books, graphic novels, and then you can paint it in such a way where you have some closure, and then by popular demand saying, we want more," and then you decide, "I don't wanna write more." That actually needs to be a really honest question for big name artists. Like, even people in the indie space today, like, let's say 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they've established this universe and their own mental health can't handle it. That's when I would say as a reader, "Hey, I appreciate what you did. You don't have to do more. I would love more, but if it's gonna wreck the world and the lore, you don't have to do more for me." I would never go so far to demand, like, if let's say I was living in the '80s or the '70s and '80s and I grew up with Asimov and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, do more Asimov," and then I knew ahead of time his stories were gonna come to where they were with the Foundation series. I would have said, "No, no, you don't have to do more if you don't want to." And I think artists need to be very honest with themselves about that. Just make a good series, conclude it, and you never have to touch that series again. You could that's the freedom of creative expression, is like you can move on to something else. Don't pull that horse out of the river, man. It's dead. Don't don't lobotomize and put that horse through electric shock so it will, you know, you know, stumble in the race. It's gone. Like, do something else. So, anyway. Ghost Planet Maxine says, "The robots in iRobot, look weird." Yeah, it wasn't necessarily uncanny to me, but it just didn't have, like, a signature look, you know? Yeah, I think, Ghost Planet does say, Asimov was an atheist. I mean, a lot of the science fiction writers are, you know? Um, and sometimes they'll put their beliefs in the sci-fi writing, and if the story is good, that doesn't phase me. I'll still really like their fiction. Samuel Proctor, welcome. You say, "I spent way too much, time watching, Cinema Sins when I was in junior high." That's funny. Yeah, he's I don't know if he's still around, but, like, he was pretty good. Oh, bye. Bye, Amy. Good to see you. Good thank you for coming back. Watch out for my or look out for my, Super Collider video. Ghost Planet says, "Fan Man has been missing in action for a while. I hope he does a stream again soon." I think he was just taking a winter break, like a few weeks off, because he had to travel, a couple weeks back, and I think he may start again, but he's also starting school again next week, so we'll see. Eldred's Eldridge fan. Welcome. You missed a lot. I don't know if you missed much. I was just ranting about the major problems of the last two books of the Foundation series. Eldridge fan says when Paul Anderson started the Terran Empire series, he was a believer in the UN as a solution to the world's problems. By the end, he changed his position, and the work shows it to its advantage. I mean, if the yeah, that's a good point too. Like, let's say you change. Let's say even in the middle of your series, whatever you're writing. Let's say you change, um, and like in the middle of the series, you change politically or even spiritually. I still would say keep to the plot, keep to the narrative, don't change characters. Don't change the integrity of the work just because you change. I know that's a tall order for a lot of people, and a lot of people would contend with that idea, saying, "I'm the artist, it's my sole expression, I can do whatever I want with it." But a lot of people don't believe, they truly don't believe, and if you guys don't believe this either, that's your prerogative, that's your belief, and I hear it, I respect it. But I'm of the mind that yes, artistic expression, yes, the culmination of your artistic work, your endeavors to create a masterpiece. But as soon as an art piece, doesn't matter what it is, as soon as an art piece takes on a life of its own, yes, you are the creator, but as creator, you need to honor its integrity. So whatever the essence, whatever is integral, whatever is innate about that body of work, that's up to you to cultivate it, to maintain it. But it is not up to you, even as the sole artist, it is not up to you to say, I can do whatever I want with it. I can dominate it. You don't dominate your own artwork. I know that's a lot. It's crazy to think about to a lot of people saying, wait a second, this is me. Like, it's my voice. It's my choice. My art, my choice. And it's not. Like once you, as soon as your art piece takes on a life of its own, you maintain the integrity of that artwork. Some people think, well, that's just too trippy. That's just too weird. Some of you might even, get off stream for such a statement, but why are we so disappointed when expectations are turned around? Like I was very disappointed with Asimov's trajectory of the Foundation series because the trilogy took on a life of its own. It was made to have a very interesting setup for any future conflict between two foundations. And Asimov saying, nope, nope, that doesn't matter anymore. Harry Seldon, the ultimate Christ figure of that galaxy, that doesn't work. That doesn't matter. There are other galaxies to be explored. It's not just about the human race. It's not just about you being isolated in your own little internal thoughts and stuff like that. It's not about your privacy. It's about the collectivism, this utopian collectivism for the good of human beings, for the good of the human soul. It's about us joining together as a collectivist being. Basically, Gaia is a giant goddess of millions of mind, billions of minds, or millions of worlds and stuff like that. It's like I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not saying science fiction can't go crazy over the top like that, but set it up in a convincing way. Asimov didn't. I don't know what prompted him to want to go that route. It's like you had the mule. Oh, you had the second foundation. If you wanted to work with Gaia, work at it with like centuries later or centuries prior, but not like smack dab in the middle of those events. So anyway. All right, moving on down. Big Al says, wow, sound engraver. That horse imagery was terrifying. Yeah. The reason why I said dead horse, I think of Tom Shippey, who was the Tolkien scholar. And if you go back to behind the scenes of The Lord of the Rings, a lot of people thought like the way Tolkien wrote, they thought this is not going to be published. This is not going to be, or if it's going to be published, it's not going to be accepted. And, he put it this way. He's like, people thought Tolkien was flogging a dead horse, but it wasn't a dead horse. It was a Derby winner or Derby winner. Derby? He's British, so I don't know exactly the right word, but Derby, right? Anyway, the whole point was he produced a stallion, um, and people thought it was a dead horse, so every time I think of dead horse, I think of that. Um, I hope I've been on the right mic the whole time. It's probably too late now, but, I just wanna check. Okay, that's good. Andreas says, "People think George Lucas hated Star Wars because he didn't want to make more movies, but the fact that is that he had a story and he told it, exactly. He wasn't the type to milk it." It's funny because modern writers, want to make the next MCU make a franchise. I know, it's like, for all the criticism that Lucas gets or had, had received, with the prequels and stuff like that, he knew when to tell a story and when to end a story. He didn't need, that's the thing, like, the credit to Lucas, who produced a multi-billion dollar franchise with his stories, still felt like he didn't need to milk the cow. That is crazy admirable when you think about it. For all the flaws and anything, any comments that Lucas may have said, that are controversial or whatever, I mean, I think even if he says, I don't know if he said that, I could be misremembering. Even if he went out and said Luke Skywalker is not it, it's Anakin Skywalker, he would be wrong. But even if he's wrong about different things, I'm not saying he's wrong about that because maybe he does believe Luke Skywalker is the central, he's the core of Star Wars. But even so, props to George Lucas for creating, for making a story, filming a story, having it cause, creating it to be a multi-billion-dollar franchise, having it last 40 years. Disney's very quick to end that, and that legacy. Uh, Having a 40-year, multi-billion-dollar franchise, and him saying, you know what, I want to take a step back. I wanna be with my family, I wanna do other stuff. That is a very honest creator. Can you imagine the pressure you would feel if your story reached those heights, and then you would have rabid fans all over saying, at Comic-Cons and conferences and conventions and fairs and all sorts of stadium events saying, "Make more Star Wars, make more Star Wars," because the demand would be there. And it got to be where it was such a creative pressure that it actually broke you spiritually and mentally, and you didn't have the capacity, you didn't have the discipline to say, "Listen," or even the self-awareness. You didn't even have the self-awareness to say, "I can't, guys." And yeah, we can moan and complain about what Disney has done. Maybe at the time of him selling it to Disney, maybe at the time, Lucas really thought in his heart that this was the right thing to do. And if that's true, if that's his real story, I can't fault him for that. I can't blame him for that. Um, that's just being intellectually and artistically honest with yourself. Now, I don't know the real story about Lucas. Maybe some of you know it better than me, but I would much rather have him had stopped with the prequels, leave everything else to the EU. He gave people permission to write what they wrote with the EU, and then just be done. I never needed a sequel trilogy. When I loved Star Wars. I remember I didn't watch Star Wars until 22 years old. I was I was I was obsessed with Middle Earth at the time, and then my sister's like, "You gotta watch Star Wars." I'm like, "I'm never gonna like Star Wars." Lord of the Rings, uh, like, Lord of the Rings for life. And my twin sister, she's like, "You gotta watch Star Wars." I'm like, "Okay, I'll watch Star Wars," and I liked it. I liked it a lot. And then, like 5 years, yeah, it was about 4 or 5 years when they announced there was gonna be a sequel trilogy, and people, like, lost their minds. I remember reading the article, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, that's, uh that's cool." But I never felt like I needed it. That's the thing. Some people felt like they did, and then they got burned. Anyway, so we're coming at the 90-minute mark, and I still wanna talk about the gripes I had with Foundation and Earth in particular, and I'll be quick about it, but I think it's really, really important. feel like my microphone is so far away. I'm gonna do a test too. I'm gonna bring it up. Kick the cable. Sorry. There we go. I probably should have had it there anyway. You guys can you guys hear me better? 1 second. Ah. No. I made the mistake of turning the volume down, but I don't think I needed to. All right. Because this might be its own separate video. I don't know. I kind of actually want to talk about it on a separate video, which I will record in a couple weeks. So just recap the Foundation subsequent novels. So Foundation and Earth in particular. The major problems was Foundation and Earth, the book, totally broke, at least from what I've read of the robot world. Mike, I want to see my hand. All right, there we go. We'll keep it there. All right. So what was I saying? The problem with Foundation and Earth, the fifth book, not including the prequels, the problem with that book is that at the very end of it all, it broke the universe. It undermined the Selden plan. It totally undermined the first and second Foundation, the Foundationers of the first and second Foundation. The conflict between the two, it undermined the power, Gaia in particular, undermined the power of the mule, the threat of the mule. The mule was a great antagonist, and I just don't like that the book and also Foundation's Edge just totally just stripped the mule of all his power, all his tragedy involving his power. His background, his origin story, it should have been unknown. It should have remained unknown. Asimov thought it was a good idea to kind of bring it to light and say, "Oh, this is the truth about the mule's past." I'm like, he should have had a better past. Foundation and Earth, at the very end of that book, broke the 3 laws of robotics and broke the Selden plan and the whole point of bringing the galaxy together effectively, really effectively, a new galaxy that is better than the previous galaxy. Not galaxy, empire. It was effectively supposed to be a better thing for humanity. With the workings of the Selden plan and the constant working and reacting to the Selden plan, to the different events by second Foundationers, first Foundationers. It was a perfect setup. And the end of Foundation and Earth broke that. It undermined that. It said, hey, no, Selden plan doesn't matter. All you're reading, all those books before doesn't matter. Selden doesn't matter. His plan doesn't matter. The whole galaxy doesn't matter because there are millions of galaxies. You know, so it was like this kind of like, hey, let's think, let's go outside the box that I've created for us. Let's and it didn't work. The plot didn't work. And so never, ever, ever undermine your world that you established 30 years ago. That's the whole point of my ranting about Foundation and Earth. Let's talk about the little gripes I have with the writing of Foundation and Earth in particular. I will say Foundation's Edge was better structurally, narratively, and in terms of characterization and characters, it was much better on the whole. Foundation and Earth, I had many, many problems with. The first big problem I had was the book is very poor and very rickety in structure. It's not a well-structured book. For the first thing, I would say you don't get really anything interesting until page 80. Because up until that point, up until I marked it, page 87 is where it gets interesting. The first real conflict happens. But up until that point, up until page 87, it is just diatribes of philosophy and perspective. And this is my point of view. And that's your point of view. I don't agree with it. I can respect that, but you don't agree with me. So we can't really be friends. But I'll let you go on your ship with me because you're the lover of my companion here. And it was just this bickering back and forth between Golan Trevize and Bliss, the guy and woman. And straight up for for 80 pages, it should have been put in a scholarly journal, like, of literature or something, like, somewhere in the academic stacks of some university, because it was being too wordy, um, too stretching the point. Have you ever been in a debate, or have you ever seen a debate on YouTube where, like, the debaters, they have their positions, but they don't know how to debate. They don't know how to listen to the other person, and they misconstrue what the position of the other person. And as an onlooker, I see, "Wait, no, no, that's his position." And they're like, "No, no, no, you misinterpreted me. That's not what I said. Those aren't the words I said." I'm like, "Well, no, he's trying to say it in this way, but he can't because he's under pressure because it's a live stream or whatever." A couple of times I've seen live streams where I'm like, "You guys aren't listening to each other." That was exactly what I had encountered with, the the 80 pages of just constant philosophical diatribes. Basically, Bliss, the guy and woman, the representative of Gaia, she's like, "You know, you chose Galaxia. You chose our influence over all the galaxy. And so why don't you accept it? I won't tamper with your mind, but why won't you accept it?" And it's like, "Well, I feel wrong about I feel wrong that I feel right about this. I need to know why." And it was that for 80 pages. So that's the first thing. That's the first gripe that I have with Foundation and Earth. The second, pretty much the main gripe I really, really had was Treves as a protagonist is very unlikable. He is antagonistic the whole way. He's and I get it. He's struggling with some conflict. He feels like the weight of the galaxy is on his shoulders and he's trying to find why something is right. Cool. A good idea to establish. But he's very antagonistic toward Bliss, the guy and woman, but also his friend who's actually a very meek, very down to earth, doesn't want to step on any toes. He's just a nice, likable guy. This scholar friend he's with. And when Treves is in the computer and trying to like work out the spaceship and work out the science and all of that, and Pelleret, his friend, doesn't want to bother him, and he's always annoyed. Treves is always annoyed, always antagonistic towards Bliss. Toward Bliss, she's not that likable herself in some ways. She can come across as high and mighty in her position, but constantly antagonistic. And I wonder if science fiction writers at the time didn't want to just paint the overall external conflict. Like, no, no, we have to have characters just bickering all the time and fighting all the time. I'm not against infighting if it's legit. If there's a real problem that has to be resolved, but Treves was just antagonistic for the sake of being antagonistic. Like, bro, come on, soften your heart just a little bit. I know you have a lot of pressure, but you're really annoying me as a reader. I didn't want to be with him. Like we followed his perspective. The reader follows his perspective the whole time, and he's just not a nice guy to be around. Like I wouldn't want to be in the same room with him for more than like 10 minutes before I'm like, okay, I got work to do. I need to go somewhere else. He's like okay, I won't say this hasn't been true of me before, but I do remember being in a roommate situation where she was a nice enough girl, but, like, she was really no nonsense, and I always felt like I had to, like, walk on eggshells around her, like, I felt like I wasn't living right, like, I couldn't live she had expectations of me that I was like, "Oh, I don't feel right about this. You're not mean per se, but you're business-minded, you're like." I guess she didn't like me lounging around the place during winter break or whatever. She just I don't know. I had just a weird roommate relationship in that regard, and the same is true for Treves. He was like that roommate where his friends are uncomfortable with him because he's just so like that. And the other gripe that I have, well, actually, even more with his antagonism, they during the events of Foundation and Earth, he that by no choice of their own, really Bliss basically wants to to if I say that right, Bliss basically wants to save a child's life. The child is going to die at the hands of these robots, but because she's this hermaphroditic creature, like she has both male and female vitals and stuff like that. Because of that, she's still a child, but she's a little different, you know? Um, and because of that, Trevize, he he looks at that condition more than she is a child and was okay with the child fending for herself at the hands of robots that want to kill her. And because Bliss is like, "No, we gotta take this child aboard. Child's safe." Child has a very peculiar mentation about her, and Trevize is very uneasy with the child the whole time. But because of that, he's also very hostile toward the child. And so it's another 80 pages of back and forth saying, "Don't call her a monster. I know she's hermaphroditic, but just because she's different doesn't mean she's bad," or something like that. And then on the one hand, okay, yeah, if you're a little weirded out that someone's different, yeah, but save a child's life. Like, don't let her, fend, you know, fend for itself or herself. These these robots that want to kill her. And Trevize is hostile to the child the whole time. I thought he was going to soften up, give the child credit for different things that were happening. And then basically he just wants Bliss to nanny her and mother her away from his presence the whole time. And, hermaphroditic or whatever, still a child. And I'm sorry, when a character, you don't have to have children. And you can choose not to have children in your life. That's fine. But when someone is really antagonistic toward children because they're children, I immediately don't feel right with them as characters. So I'm like, I'm in his perspective. I don't like him. And he's very hostile to the child, very antagonistic to even his friend. Don't like him. He's just not a likable character at all. I just don't like him at all. The other gripe I have with him is, and this is kind of a cautionary thing for you prospective writers out there, especially with science fiction. If you want to do a lot of sci-fi talk and science fiction or science talk, that's one thing. Have a smart guy, you know. But basically, Asimov used Trevize as this kind of person to extrapolate and expound upon all these astronomical sciences and physics and computer tech and stuff like that. Now he's a councilman. He's a politician who has had Navy training, so he knows how to fly a ship. Cool, I accept that. But then when he goes into crazy lengths of talking about how planetary science works, I'm like, okay, you're a politician first. You were first a politician. That's your expertise. And so when Asimov uses him as a way to just talk science, like there were some times I was like flipping the pages, like, you know what? It's probably interesting science, but because I can't believe that he knows all of that, I'm just, I don't care for it. So a lot don't use your characters as exposition dumps, especially when it requires science technology. Just put it in the action. Put it, have a teacher character, but you gotta have more than just your main protagonist knowing everything. And that's also annoying. What else? Um, yeah, there were also some unpleasant things like involving him. It sounds a little crass, but basically, he's in the past, he hasn't had time to womanize in his adventure, but in the past, he is kind of a womanizer, and it's a little awkward. Asimov is a little awkward. I don't know if it's like that awkward uncle thing, but he's fine. Uh, just I gotta get this information. Okay, I'll disrobe and get my information from this pretty woman or this strong militant woman that I find really crazy attractive for some reason. And then like, okay, so he has his way with women. That's one thing, but it's seen later in the book that the robot there's like, no, the robot and Gaia, they knew that the women were attracted to you, but then they touched their minds, they tampered with their minds, like, I want to be in bed with you. And it's like, this is weird. So weird. He wasn't like that. Asimov was not like that with his characters in the previous book. It's like, it's just weird. And then they talk about moral quandaries. It's like, oh, why do you have to get information from this woman this way and stuff like that? And then they argue about, don't tell me about morals and stuff like that. It's like, you guys aren't moral people because you don't have you don't have faith, you don't have a religion. So you shouldn't even talk about morals if you don't have a religion, you know? I could do what I want. So like it's weird. So just all this bickering and stuff like that. And so those were my few gripes with Foundation and Earth. Foundation's Edge, I mean, if you're still curious about reading it, it's a better told story. Foundation's Edge, there are a lot of things I like about it. I just don't like the end. Foundation and Earth, I didn't enjoy it. Even with the interesting stuff happening, I didn't enjoy it. So please, if you guys have protagonists and heroes and stuff, make them likable. Don't make them disagreeable all the time just because you need conflict. So that's all I have to say. All right, this was almost a 2-hour stream. Oh my gosh, I gotta wrap it up. Um, let's see. Brian Gilmar says, debaters on YouTube don't debate so much as engage in blood sport. Probably true. Yeah, I saw a recent debate. I didn't even know it was going to be a debate. I thought it was going to be a discussion because the topic looked interesting. And I was listening to both sides of the two guys at it, and one guy had a position, another guy had a disagreement with that position. But I wasn't siding with either side, by the way. But I was like trying to mentally put it in in the stream. I was like, no, listen to him carefully. He's presenting his argument like this way, and then you're being absolutely accusatory with something that he didn't say. You're inferring that he said this when he said this. But it's a matter of him not this first guy. He didn't know how to state his position. He didn't speak it very well. But I knew what he was going for. It was painful to watch. I was like, you know what? I didn't finish it. I didn't finish the video because they weren't really talking about what I was hoping they were talking about. All right. Samuel Proctor says, again, every time you talk about a story as just being pure philosophy and debates, I just get flashback of to Atlas Shrugged. Never read it. I don't really have any plan on reading it. People say you should if it's I'm like, people say it's a seminal piece of fiction. I'm like, people say a lot of things are seminal pieces of fiction, and I've read them. I'm like, it shouldn't have been. All right. So anyway, Samuel Proctor says, speaking of the how do you pronounce them? Wachowski brothers. I just watched Jupiter Ascending. It was fun and entertaining. The acting could have used some work though. I agree. I watched that movie a long time ago. I didn't particularly care for it. It was motives were weird. Sometimes she cried for no reasons that I could like. It was weird. I didn't. It's visually appealing, but I didn't care for the story at all. So anyway, story first, then visuals. Yeah. Anyway, I think we'll wrap it up there. So that was fun. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. I didn't mean to talk about the story at length. Just as a recap, I do really like Asimov, and if you have any questions on if you were interested in reading Isaac Asimov, I have recommendations because a lot of his stuff is really good. So if you ever need recommendations, I will give them to you. But I haven't read the prequels, but as it stands, I just prefer, one more time because it's a beautiful book. I just prefer the Foundation trilogy. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's a solid story. It's a solid 3 books. This is all 3 novels in here. And it's fine on its own. It stands on its own. This is, I would say, A tier classic science fiction. The following books were D tier, like really. And I can't say anything of the prequels. So I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna take a break from Asimov for a little bit, read a few short stories. I'm gonna read an EU book based on the games, the Old Republic games of Star Wars. It's gonna be The Deceived with Lord Malgus. But Prof, my husband, my wonderful husband, said I should read a couple graphic novels first, or a couple comics first before getting into that. So I'm going to get into that, get into some short stories by another sci-fi writer, and that should be it. But going forward, Ninebreaker, good to see you. We just finished. It was a long stream, so there's a lot to look at on the replay. So hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully I made sense. But anyway, going forward, I will have another commentary video this Friday about people really nitpicking my criticism of my Red Rising short and saying, "Hey, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect." And so I'm going to talk about the word "perfect" on that commentary. That's going to be this Friday, published this Friday at 12 p.m. noon Eastern time. I also have a SuperCollider video coming up tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern time, and I'll be streaming again. I think I'll have my computer this way. I liked how this worked. So anyway, hopefully that all was good. I like the look of it and all, and we'll see you next Sunday. You guys have a good weekend. Oh, thank you, Eldridge fan. Maybe I'll take a look at it. Paul, yes, Paul Anderson, Terran Empire. Thank you for the super chat, and I will consider that recommendation. I'll see you guys later.